That's the key. That's the thing that we got to continually be reminded of. And sometimes we can be in church or sometimes on the internet and we hear things and we be like, oh, I heard that before. But if you be honest about your life and you reflect back on certain moments, even though you heard it for 30 years, sometimes you still don't put it into practice the way that it should be put into practice, right? Like we shouldn't be, or allow situations to get us down as much as they do if we've been saved, as long as we say we've been saved, right? So even though Eat Up Monday. Hey, what's going on, family? You guys already know what day it is. It is the day after Sunday. Welcome to another Eat Up Mondays. Listen, these last couple of weeks, we've been talking a lot about, first of all, how we have to trust in the Lord, which, we know that's a given, but really about how not only do we have to trust the Lord, but about how God has us, right? Like God got us. He has our best interests at heart. And sometimes we have to be reminded of that because sometimes if we're not careful, we can get in the way. So I kind of want to stay along those lines on this week. Last week, we read out of Psalm chapter 41, and I'll get into that in a second. But with that being said, guys, if you guys have brought your appetite, know that I definitely have brought mine. So without further ado, guys, let's dig in. As I said a second ago, last week we got into Psalm chapter 41. And one of the aspects we were talking about how God has us is from the aspect of when a friend betrays us, right? Or when somebody that we consider close to us to do something wrong to us, right? And we talked about David and how he felt in Psalm 41 about this individual and how we could feel about somebody like that may be a family member or just a really close friend or somebody that we thought was a really close friend, but did, the unspeakable. So as we were reading that particular chapter, we just talked about the importance of really trusting God and letting God handle those situations. And I kind of wanted to just touch on another Psalm of David. And that's going to be Psalm chapter 54. And it reads as follows. It says, save me, O God, by thy name, and judge me by thy strength. Hear my prayer, O God. Give ear to the words of my mouth. For strangers are risen up against me. So now he's talking about strangers, in that situation where he was going through with King Saul and some other men had rose up against him. He says, for strangers are risen up against me. Remember, we were talking about friends last time, right? And oppressors seek after my soul. They have not set God before them, right? So they're not, doing this behind the counsel of God, right? They're not seeing things the way God sees them. They're just doing things in the flesh and doing their own thing. And they're coming after David. And how do we know that? Because we know that David is operating under, God's spirit, right? So he goes on to say in verse 4, behold, God is mine helper. That's the key. That's the thing that we got to continually be reminded of. And sometimes we can be in church or sometimes on the internet and we hear things and we be like, oh, I heard that before. But if you be honest about your life and you reflect back on certain moments, even though you heard it for 30 years, sometimes you still don't put it into practice the way that it should be put into practice, right? Like we shouldn't be, or allow situations to get us down as much as they do if we've been saved, as long as we say we've been saved, right? So even though sometimes we be like, oh, I heard that before. That's what Paul was talking about in the New Testament. He said, listen, I don't have a problem repeating these things to you. Why? Because it needs to be repeated sometime. And this is something that we have to continually remind ourselves when we are going through is that, behold, God is mine helper. The Lord is with them that uphold my soul. Verse 5, he shall reward evil unto mine enemies. God is going to take care of that. Cut them off in thy truth. And verse 6 goes on to say, I will freely sacrifice unto thee. I will praise thy name, O Lord, for it is good. Last verse. For he, the helper, remember, for he, the helper, God, for he have delivered me out of all trouble. And mine eye have seen his desire upon mine enemies. And that was something we talked strongly about last week, because if you remember in Psalm 41, if you haven't seen it, I'll make sure I put a link in the description where you can go back and check last week's Eat Up Monday. But if you remember, David says something like, listen, Lord, remember me so that and strengthen me so that I can take revenge on my enemies, so I can pay them back for what they've done to me. But I was saying last week, like, listen, that's not the right spirit to have. But if you notice the next verse, he talks about how God has showed him favor. Why? Because his enemies had not triumphed over him, right? So even though he was in the wrong spirit, he wants to pay them back. God says, vengeance is mine. And this is what he's saying right here in the 7th verse. He says, his eye have seen the Lord's desire upon his enemies, because it's ultimately up to the Lord on how he's going to handle your enemies, or those that were your friends that have became your enemies, or that they're somewhat your friends, but it's hard for you to forgive them for what they did. God is going to deal with all that. All we have to do is keep doing what David is saying here, calling out to the Lord in prayer, right? Understanding that he is our helper, truly trusting in him, and not, trying to take matters into our own hands. So I just wanted to reiterate again this week, 3rd week in a row, that God got us. God has you. Stop worrying. Stop trying to do things yourself. Stop getting in the way. Stop telling people off. Stop trying to prove something to somebody. You don't have to do that. God has it all under control. Know that I love you guys. Know that I appreciate you guys for always joining me here on Eat Up Mondays. And with that being said, guys, thank you. I love you. And until the next beautiful spiritual meal that we share together, God bless you and shalom.